This is Pawprint, an animal rescue community, episode 98. I'm Nancy Rhee.
And I'm Harold Rhee.
Today's guest is the incredible Deb Ozarko, host of the Unplug podcast.
Deb comes to us by way of British Columbia, Canada. And what I love about her is her focus on self, her focus on authenticity. And wait for the end of the episode, she gives one of the most original answers to what would you do with a magic wand to change animal rescue. If you want to learn more about Deb, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/98. That's the number 98. We start out by asking Deb what it means to unplug in today's world.
For me, unplugging I don't take this literally. For me, it's more of a metaphor for unplugging from the status quo. So unplugging from mainstream groupthink and plugging into the authenticity that is at the core of who we are. So without, getting too woo-woo and using cliche phrases, for me, it's about unplugging from status quo and really just plugging into our hearts. And when we plug into our hearts, we no longer do the bidding on this culture of distraction and destruction and consumption. And instead, we live from a place that's about compassion and passion and presence and purpose. And that's the essence of my podcast. It's about really just reminding people who they are at their core. So they stop with the nonsense that's going on out there that's so harmful to our planet and to our souls.
Why, and this may sound, apologies if this sounds a little too simple, why is it important for each of us as individuals to discover that inner core, right? That authentic self?
Well, if you look at the prevailing culture these days, especially these days, everything seems to be ramping up and imploding at an accelerated rate. Like we're looking at a widespread collapse of so many systems that are happening. It's playing out in real time right now. And of course, with Donald Trump coming into, the the foreground of our consciousness, I think everything's going to implode at a faster rate. So, and I think that when you look at all of the accelerating collapse, I mean, sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not so obvious. We can feel it more on an energetic level. And on an energetic level, this collapse is manifesting in people as anxiety and depression and stress. And a lot of people out there are like walking time bombs. And I think that's why you're seeing so many crazy instances of mass shootings and just people just like blowing their lids off, literally and metaphorically, especially in the US, but all over the place. I mean, it's people are just not coping with this culture that we have created that is so far removed from our souls and from our hearts. And so that's why, it is a simple question, and it's really a simple answer. The simple answer is that who we are lives in our hearts. It doesn't live in the conditioning that has removed us from our souls and our hearts that supports this culture. Right. So, and I'm really passionate about it because I love this planet. I love animals. And I love the human soul. I love the human heart. I don't love the conditioned ego that's out there destroying this planet. But I know that at our core, we're so much more. And so that's what I speak to, just to remind people to wake up, really. Stop being so fearful of who you are. Stop being so fearful of living your purpose. Yeah, I mean, it's hard because our culture is based on perpetual growth, infinite growth, and it's based on consumption. And you have to, you're born, you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, and then you die feeling unfulfilled because you haven't lived the way you were meant to live. And I mean, if you look at, there was an article that I read a few months ago, and it was a hospice worker who wrote about the top 10 regrets that people have on their deathbed. And I can't remember if it was the top one or the second top regret, but it was about not having lived their purpose and saying yes to the expectations of others, parents, authority figures, and our culture. So that's kind of my simple and not so simple answer to your question.
No, thanks for sharing that. So I guess if someone listens to you, they get inspired. They're like, wow, this Deb Ozarko really has her finger on the pulse of something that's been bothering me, right? What are some of the initial steps people can take to truly unplug?
Oh, the very first thing, and the most important thing that I can suggest is to stop listening to the repetitive patterns that are playing out in your head. So all of those voices in your head, that incessant chatter that just keeps nagging at you, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Well, we shouldn't be shooting all over ourselves in the first place. We should never be shooting at ourselves. When we're shooting ourselves, that's coming from our conditioning. And if we can instead drop into our bodies and feel what's going on in our bodies, you'll see the dissonance between the head and the body, which is metaphorically, it's the heart, because the heart expresses itself through the body. And to get a little spiritual, the soul expresses itself through the body. But we live in a culture that is conditioned to operate from the neck up. And so we completely negate the wisdom of our bodies. And if we were to just if we were to stop thinking and start feeling more, we would understand how disconnected we actually are from the way we're meant to live. So, and it's a hard one for a lot of people, because we think that we're in our bodies because we walk around and we do what we need to do, but we're going on autopilot. Our brains are actually controlling the show. So, people can get into meditation if they want to, but really it's all about kind of just noticing how much chatter is going on in your head and realizing, well, what am I feeling? Instead of just going on autopilot with the brain, stop yourself and just ask, what am I feeling? And notice, just pay attention to that. I think that's a first step, is just to remind yourself to get into your body. And from there, I think the rest just kind of takes care of itself. So it's about living a really embodied existence rather than a mental existence. And kind of like the way I describe it, it's about switching the power structure, because our culture teaches us, like I said, to live in our heads. So we're living from the neck up, and we completely negate our bodies until something goes wrong, and then we're off in the hospital. But if we were to lead with our bodies and implement with our minds, it's a complete paradigm shift. And it sounds so simple, but it's actually really profound because of the way we've been conditioned in our lives. So that's kind of that's my big global answer that kind of takes care of the rest of things.
Yeah. Well, you call it the global answer, but really it's so intimate, right? It's just can you truly listen to yourself and stop distracting yourself with you hate to say it, it's that voice inside your head that tells you can't do something.
Exactly. And that's it. And because we've been conditioned. And if you trace back a lot of those voices that are in our heads, you'll remember as a child, your father said, oh, you'll never be able to do this. Or your mother said, you should be this when you grow up. And your teacher said this and this and this. And, when we're kids, our minds are like little sponges, and they take all of this in literally. And then it becomes a destructive pattern that we play out repetitively with the voices in our heads as we get older. And we never question it. There's no critical thought. There's no critical thought in our world, but there's no critical thought within our own lives. And that's where it actually starts. So if we just it really, it's just about paying attention to what is going on in my head, and why am I saying yes to this? And why am I not even questioning it? And start with that. And it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like, oh my God, that happened when I was 4. And I'm still playing this out as an adult. No wonder I'm so trapped in my own fear, or my own self-worth issues, or my own whatever, So if we take a stand, just stop with our own heads and start examining what's going on in there, we'd be really surprised.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we get to the animals, just wanted to just have you share, maybe if you're willing to, when I read your bio, when I listen to episodes of Unplug, one of the things that did happen in your life is, it sounds like one example of something that impacted you was the death of your mother. That kind of got you to move into a different trajectory. You want to maybe share a little bit about your mother, maybe how that really did change you?
Oh, that was actually the catalyst for the work that I'm doing today. I mean, my life has always been one of passion and a purpose, and I've always lived my life from an activist perspective because of my love for animals and the earth. But I didn't realize how much my own conditioning was interfering with living my full potential and my true purpose until the death of my mother. And that was in January of 2010. And it was unexpected. I mean, the whole story is it's not really important right now, but it was an unexpected death that was, the repercussions were very messy and very ugly for my sisters and I. And at that point, my father had already passed away. So I was an orphan, and it was a weird paradigm shift for me. And because of the circumstances of her death, I was in such a state of shock that it forced me to realize the brevity of life. And I think that that's one thing that we just take for granted. We think that we think we're infinite, or we think that we're immortal, that we're going to live forever, that we're not going to die. But the thing about every single one of us is that we have an expiry date as soon as we're born to the world. And it's so, and I was just as guilty as everybody else. Like, I mean, I knew I was going to die, but I thought it was way, way, way off when, and I never even thought about it. But my mother's death forced me to look at my own mortality. And in looking at my own mortality, I realized how much of my life I wasn't living to my full potential. And so it started me on this journey of self-exploration. And that really changed me. I started going to workshops and retreats. And I mean, I was filled with grief too, and a lot of anger because of the circumstances. And so I needed a lot of healing. And on that journey, I really started to get to know who Deb Ozarko really is. Not the persona of Deb Ozarko, but the core essence of Deb Ozarko. And I knew that I was only living a partial life, and that wasn't good enough for me. So her death inspired life in me. And my mom she was like a best friend to me. We had such a close relationship, and which is another reason why it was just such a shock and so hard for me. So yeah, her death was a catalyst, and it sent me on a journey that led to a massive paradigm shift, which has inspired everything that I've done since. And that's why I can speak to the power of unplugging from culture and plugging into your heart from personal experiences, because I lived it. And I see how it's changed my life, and how it's enhanced my life, and how it's made it richer and more beautiful and sacred and simpler at the same time. And so if I can do it, if I can change, then and live in a way that is more aligned with that core essence that I talk about, then I know anybody can. And I would love to see a world that has just come alive with people who are living from that place, rather than this place that's shrouded, where we're shrouded by this numb. Yeah, it's like we're numbed out to who we are. with the fear that we as a species, we as a collective live in. We're just like, the I can't mantra that everybody chants because that's what we've been conditioned to be. Well, I'm here to say that you can and you should. There's a should that actually is applicable because that's who you are. So yeah, my mom's death was definitely pivotal to where I'm at today. And as hard as it was at the time, I'm really grateful for who emerged from who I thought Deb Ozarko was to today.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like coming out of the fire in some ways, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. The phoenix.
That's right. Well, speaking of mythical animals, speaking of animals in general, tell us a little bit about the important animals in your life.
Oh boy, I could not live without animals in my life. Let's put it that way. And right now I live with 6 beautiful furry beings in my life. I've got 3 dogs, Zoey and Dharma and Francis, who is my beautiful soulmate. I love them all dearly, but Francis, I think that your listeners are probably familiar with those ones that just have a little bit of an extra tug on the heart. And I have 3 cats. I have Tony and Barney and Karma, and they're just little loves too. So yeah, these are the beings that keep me on track. So they're the ones that remind me of my own essence when I find myself falling into my own conditioned patterns, because I'm not exempt from still slipping into old patterns. But when I look at them, they're like my greatest gurus.
Mm. You say Francis is the one you're closest to. What makes Francis special?
Well, there's a story to this. Let's see, when did it start? Probably 1991. I adopted my first dog as an adult. That I'd moved out of the house and I was ready to have my first dog. And my first dog was Marley. And I was a volunteer at the local Humane Society when I was living in Ottawa at that time. And they called me up for my very first foster. They said, we have a little 8-week-old German Shepherd who needs a foster parent. Would you be willing to do so? And I'm like, yes, I will gladly do it. And I went and I picked her up, and I already knew that she was not going to be foster, that I was going to adopt her. So I was an immediate foster failure.
A foster failure, yes.
Yeah,
well known in animal rescue circles. So yes.
And Marley was I'm not sure if she was a full shepherd or a shepherd mix. She was smaller, so maybe she was a shepherd mix, but she was such a goofball, and she just stole my heart. And I loved her, and I just couldn't even imagine myself living without her. And I see now very clearly how she was a canine soulmate for me. And so I had her for a year, and then as I was still volunteering at the Humane Society, and I rescued another dog, Jake. And there was quite a story for him. I was actually going in just to do some work there, and this woman and her son brought Jake in to be euthanized. They said he bit a child at the park, and we want to have him euthanized. And I heard this story, and I looked at this dog, and I could feel his energy, and I knew that he was gentle. And so they released this dog, and I could feel myself getting angry because I knew that they were lying, or if he did bite, it was probably provoked. And I had a few words with the people behind the counter at the Humane Society, and I said, I want to adopt him. And they said, well, you can't because he's got a bite record and we have to euthanize him. And I said, yeah, but look at him. Like, can't you feel his energy? I mean, that's the thing. They just go on people's word.
Right. Face value.
Exactly. And they said, well, we have to go by what they said. And I said, yeah, but what if they're lying, for crying out loud? This is a beautiful, innocent being. Anyways, it turned into this big, huge fight. And eventually, and I'm a Scorpio, and I'm very stubborn, and I'm very passionate. And so, and I can be intimidating when I'm very passionate. And so, and that's an asset. I got that from my father. And I managed to uh, work out a deal with them that they would hold him for 48 hours or whatever the legal limit was, and then I would come back and I would adopt him. And I went back 48 hours later, like on the dot, to collect him, and they'd already given him his first injection to calm him down. They were going to euthanize him.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
I flipped out, and I said, "You guys, we made this arrangement," and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, I was so angry, and they just wanted me out of there. And so they said, "Well, you can take him, but he's anesthetized right now." And I said, "I don't care." So I carried this dog out. He was he was a shepherd kind of a mix as well. He was heavy, and I was sobbing the whole way out of there, just so upset with this system. So you can see, like, I'm kind of a cultural renegade right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So I scooped this dog out and I brought him home. He came out of his anesthetic, and he and Marley just bonded instantly. And he was such a lovely boy. He was the sweetest dog. I can't imagine him ever biting anyone. But yeah, there was quite a dramatic story with him. So that was the beginning. And then Jessie came into my life in 2001, I believe. Yeah. And Marley was quite elderly at that point, and Jessie was a puppy, a huge rescue effort there too. And she completely won my heart over as well. And when Marley passed away, Jessie moved right in. She slid right into that soulmate position. And so I realized, and it was so interesting because Marley was unexpected. Jessie was unexpected. They both came to me as puppies. They were both shepherd mixes. There were some similarities there. And Jessie just, wow. I mean, she passed away 2 years ago now, and I still miss her to this day. But she was such a special being.
What made Jessie special to you?
It's hard to articulate. It's a soulmate thing. So, I mean, anybody who has companions knows that there's just something special. So I don't know, like, she and I were inseparable. People talk about separation, dogs having separation anxiety. Well, I felt like I was the one who had separation anxiety whenever I was away from her. So it didn't happen very often. She was my constant companion in the car, in the canoe, on camping trips. Every day was a different hike because she got bored if I did the same hike 2 days in a row. She really, she taught me more about love and tolerance and spontaneity and joy than any other being. And I thought Marley had really, amped up my life, but Jessie just took it to a whole other level. So I realize how much I learned from her. People say that we are their guardians, but I feel like it's completely the opposite. She was like a guardian for me in so many ways, making sure that I lived the way I was meant to be living, with, living out loud. So when she died in 2014, November 30th, 2014, I was devastated. It actually hurt me more than the death of my mother, which was unbelievable. And then Francis came into my life in April of 2015. And again, completely unexpected. We already had 2 dogs at that point. We weren't considering a third. And my partner just found him on Facebook at the local SPCA, and she said, "You're not going to believe what I just found." And she had her hand covering her computer screen, and I went and I had a look. As soon as she moved her hand away, I burst into tears. And there was this interesting, it was like a really crappy photo, actually. It was overexposed, about 6 puppies in one of those big dog crates. And at the very back was Francis. You could barely see him. But as soon as I saw that picture, that crappy picture, and I saw all of the puppies, but he jumped practically right out of that computer screen and right into my heart. And I looked at my partner and I said, Jessie. And she said, it's exactly what I'm feeling too. I felt Jessie's presence in that photo, and I felt Jessie's presence in that puppy.
That's amazing.
So it was.
What was it? Physical resemblance, or what was it?
You know what's interesting, Harold, because when I look at the photo now, I see no resemblance. I don't see what it was. I don't know what it was. It was like there was an energy. It was like an energy from beyond. Like Jessie she's like, your heart is so broken and we need to heal this. Like, it's almost like she was still my guardian from beyond. And it's not almost, it's like she was. I felt her presence. That's it. I felt her presence in that photo with him. Because it's, like I said, it's so strange. When I look at the photo now, I don't see anything. But in that moment, I felt her presence, and I knew that she was leading us to get this puppy. So I looked at my partner, also named Deb, and I said, this is insane. 3 dogs. And we've had 4 before, but they were elderly. But these are 3 younger dogs. And I knew it was going to be kind of crazy. And I said, but I know that we have to go. And so we went. And there all the puppies were. And I saw him instantly burst into tears again. And I knew that he was the one. And within 40 minutes, we scooped him up. I had him in my arms, and he was coming home with us. So, and he's, again, same thing. He's just taken over my heart. So what I call it is like this soulmate lineage. So it started with Marley, and then Jessie, and now Francis. And all 3 of them, completely unexpected, shepherd mixes, and came as puppies. So it's fascinating now that I have a little bit of history to look back on to see this trail that I now call the soulmate lineage. And every single one of them just has they have a real grip on my heart.
Wow, powerful stuff. When I listen to your podcast, you have a wide range of guests, but I do notice that you regularly bring on folks who are either animal rights activists of various kinds. I believe you've had Jean Baur, Farm Sanctuary. You've had Camille, Labchuk. Why is sort of this whole animal rights movement? Why is it integral to your Unplug podcast?
Well, it's interesting because in my path to activism, at the age of 12, I actually went vegetarian when I bit into a drumstick at KFC, and I bit into some kind of a vein or a tendon or something that I couldn't chew. And when I took it away and looked at it, took it out of my mouth and looked at it, I saw this vein, and I made the connection like, oh my God, I am gnawing on a body part of an animal. It's amazing how disconnected we are in our culture, where we just eat the flesh of animals without a second thought. And so that was a big awakening for me. And I thought, I'm somebody who says I love animals, and here I am eating them, and I can't do this. So at 12, I said to my father, I said, that's it. I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And he hated that. He was a voracious meat eater, and we were at odds for the longest time. But I was, again, like I said, a product of him. So I was just as stubborn, and I went out and I went vegetarian at that age. And as I got older, I started to notice more and more of the cruelty in our world with eggs and with dairy. And I thought, oh my God, I'm such a hypocrite here. I think I'm doing so many wonderful things for the animals by not eating their flesh, but eggs and dairy are actually even worse. And so I went vegan in 1999 and started to explore more about the truth that is so skillfully hidden from us in our culture. And it made me so angry. And that was my path to animal rights activism. And I think that that's kind of like, that's the initial catalyst for a lot of people, is when they start looking at the truth of what is hidden from us, it brings up a lot of anger. Just to know that we're so lied to and we're so deceived in our culture. So activism is a natural outlet for a lot of people, and it was for me. And so I went on the path of the angry activist, animal activist path. And I did the protests, and I did all sorts of stuff with that. But then I realized how that anger that I was holding on to, which was being really inflamed by all the other activists that I was around who were just as angry, wasn't doing any good. It was really just causing more division. And the essence of my work right now is about reminding people of their non-separate nature. So in our soul, in our hearts, we're not separate from the animal world or from the natural world or from each other or even from our own selves. And that's why I bring these voices onto my show, not to speak about animal rights, but to speak about the interconnection between our choices and life, really. Because if we, when I made the choice to go vegan, all of a sudden I felt more compassion. I understood that the activism that I was participating in was actually creating more division, because I was angry at the people who were still eating meat or still drinking milk or wearing leather. And I mean, who wants to be a part of that movement? I mean, I don't. So I had to remember, I came from that conditioning as well. How do I speak to these people in a way that they understand that I'm not a threat, that I'm not about, I'm not asking them to change their lives. I'm just asking them to really just look at the choices from a place of remembrance, like from their hearts. And that has completely changed the game. And so that's why I bring the voices of people like Gene Baur on, because Gene Baur is all about compassion. He's a vegan, and he's the founder of Farm Sanctuary, and he's a very passionate vegan, but at the same time, he is so compassionate. He has so much love in his heart. He has no anger, no hostility, and he speaks to people from where they are, because he too was once conditioned into this consumptive culture that is so destructive towards the lives of animals and the natural world and everything. So, and same thing with Camille Labchuk. She's a longtime friend of mine, and she speaks from a place of great passion and presence and purpose, but also from a place of compassion, so that people understand that, we all came from the same place. We all came from the same conditioning. We have just discovered and been willing to look at the lies that have been imposed on us, so that we can now think more critically and make different choices. So my show is not about animal rights activism or environmental activism, or it's not really about activism per se, not that form of activism. If anything, it's more about soul activism. It's about remembering that we are not separate from the grand web of life that makes up this world.
Thanks for clarifying that. That's a really important point. If you could wave that magic wand when it comes to animal rescue, our companion animals, what would you try to do with that?
Oh boy, where do I even begin with that one? Wow. Okay. Well, I think you probably get the gist of my mindset. It's very different. My whole mindset is about looking at everything from a very broad lens, from a cultural perspective, from an interconnected perspective, basically from a spiritual perspective. So the truth is, for me, Harold, is that if I could wave that magic wand, I would return all animals back to their wild state, so that they were never domesticated in the first place. As much as I love having these guys in my life, the only reason I have them in my life is because they were domesticated from their natural state, and now they're reliant on us. And we're not doing a very good job. We're doing them a disservice in so many ways. That's why there's so many in the shelters. That's why there's so many needlessly euthanized every year. That's why there's so many slaughtered for food and for clothing and et cetera, et cetera. And if my magic wand would just return every living being back to its wild state, its natural primal wild state, including us, so that we would remember our souls. And that doesn't mean that we would be wearing loincloths and painting our faces. It would mean that we would be living from a place of compassion and love and interconnection. That to me is our primal wild state. And so my magic wand would rewild our world.
Thank you. Probably the most original answer we've received. Incredible. No, thank you very much. If folks want to look up Deb Ozarko and the Unplug podcast, what's the best way for people to find you?
They can go to my website. That would be debozarko.com. So DEBOZARKO.com. Awesome.
And if they want to find you on social media, what would be the best way to look you up?
They won't find me.
Oh, okay.
I actually I was on Facebook until, when was it? Oh my gosh, it might be like just over a year that I've left Facebook, and I wrote a post. So if they go to my website and they Google on my, or not Google, I guess it would be search on my website for my Facebook post, you'll understand why I left social media.
Hey, listen, you are truly practicing what you preach, right?
I live it. I live it. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Deb, wow, what an inspiration. I guess my last question would be, if you could, I don't know, talk to your mother, talk to Jessie, what do you think they'd say to you right now?
Woohoo! That's the first thing that came to my mind. And I think that was probably channeling Jessie in that moment. I think she would say that.
We want to say thank you to Deb Ozarko for sharing her story. And we also want to thank Rebecca Nemethy, guest from episode 15, for connecting us with Deb. If you want to learn more about Deb and listen to the Unplug podcast, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/98. Next episode, Nancy will be sharing some of her experiences helping a Wings of Rescue flight here in Northern California to deliver 39 fortunate dogs to the beautiful state of Idaho. So stay tuned for that on our next episode. If you'd like to meet me or Nancy on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, look for This Is Pawprint, all one word. You can see some great photos of Deb Ozarko with some of her favorite animals. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Pawprint, you can go to your favorite podcast app like iTunes, SoundCloud, or iHeartRadio. Look for Pawprint Animal Rescue and hit subscribe to get the latest episodes immediately. We want to say thanks for sharing Pawprint with your friends and family. And remember, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Pawprint.
Pawprint is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.